hacerte mi mujer. Y lo sé muy bien. Ven, vamos a acercarnos para ver cómo es. Que todo de rosa con piel con piel. Hoy quiero que te sientas mi mujer. Una y otra vez. Tu piel es dulce como la miel. Y sabes que él no la merece. Hoy tengo que hacerte mi mujer. Y lo sé muy bien. Lo sé muy bien, bebé. Real man. Esto es para ti. Él no te merece. Hoy hacemos el pacto. Vete, vamos a hacer un contrato donde solo figure buen trato. Es puro.
The views, opinions, and representations expressed on the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network and its website are those of the hosts, guests, and participants, and are not necessarily those of or endorsed by the network, its affiliated stations and broadcasts, the management, other hosts, or advertisers of the network. The shows found on the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network can, but do not necessarily, promote any particular lifestyle, belief, religion, political affiliation, or other personal practice. These shows are for entertainment purposes only, and are not intended to treat, diagnose, and or claim any cure of disease or condition, or give any medical or legal advice. You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, from our compound to you worldwide, with your host, Gary Anderson.
Boy, I can't believe the week is just winding down. Tomorrow is Friday already. Wow, it's going fast. Well, tonight you might want to get yourself a nice cup of java or a hot cup of cocoa. Find a nice, easy spot on that couch or prop up that pillow in your bed because we got a great guest tonight. We got Mary Joyce from SkyshipsOverCashiers.com. We're going to be talking about, well, past lives and more right after this.
Do you have a paranormal story you want to share on Night Dreams Talk Radio? You could be a guest. Email us at nightdreamstalkradio@gmail.com.
Please check out the Night Dreams Talk Radio website at www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. Also, if you want to keep our show free of advertising, just hit the donate button. Give a buck or two. Remember, all prior shows are always free to listen to. We at Night Dreams Talk Radio thank you for your support.
You're listening to my friend Gary Anderson on Night Dreams Talk Radio, the best in paranormal radio.
Well, tonight we have Mary Joyce on from SkyshipsOverCashiers.com. A little bit about Mary. She's been an editor, reporter for various newspapers, and she runs probably one of the best paranormal, earth changes, Bigfoot, UFO reporting centers on the internet. It's been out there a long time. And if you get onto this website, SkyshipsOverCashiers.com, well, you better have more than just a cup of Java because I'll tell you, there's days and days of info on her website. Hey, Mary, how are you doing tonight, kid?
Yes, fine. Good to hear your voice.
Well, I'm glad. I've been, suffering with a flu for 2.5 weeks. The other day I felt
too long. My goodness.
I know. And the other day I felt good. Then I started getting sick again last night. Don't get the flu shot. But don't rely on me saying it. But from my experience, being a senior citizen now, the doctor talked me into getting a flu shot geared up for senior citizens. I'll tell you what, this was the worst case of flu I've ever had in my life.
I want you to know that I have not had a flu shot ever in my life, and I haven't had the cold or a flu in at least 20 years.
Well, that's
and what I've found is there are. I'm not going to start talking about all this kind of stuff, but there are really natural things that you can do. And the one thing I keep handy all the time are oregano capsules. So the first time I start to feel like a tickle in my throat, which usually precedes the flu or a cold, I start taking the oregano, and it will just keep it from coming full-blown.
Well, I'm going to remember that next time. My daughter had the flu, and one of my other adult children had it, and they had it for like 3-4 days. And I sat there and figured, oh, God, I'm going to be fine in 3-4 days. Well, then the first week went by, the second week went by, and then half the next week went by. And I'll tell you, I don't know. I don't like being old. But, Mary, tonight, we're going to talk a little bit different than UFOs and UFO abductions and Roswell and all this stuff. we're going to be talking what? Past lives and regression and reincarnation and all that stuff?
Yeah, I thought we ought to spice it up with a little variety because we've covered many of these other topics, Bigfoot and UFOs and underground bases and a whole slew of different things, little people. And I just thought your regular listeners might like to hear something in a different direction so that they're not hearing variations on a theme, so to speak.
Oh, yeah. Unfortunately, you know what? Right now it's crazy. The people are just eating up anything to do with UFOs and abductions. I've had, Calvin Parker on. I've had, Timothy Cullen on. All these people that have been abducted, and it's crazy. But I want to get into, past lives and stuff like that.
Well, the most recent story that we have, and if somebody goes to our website, which is skyshipsovercashers.com, we have, I think the most recent 20 stories on the right-hand side of the homepage. So this is at the very top. It's the most recent thing we posted. And it is a mother telling about her son who was 3 and 4. And basically, she would hear him say things like, when I was Green Arrow, I did this or I did that. And she didn't pay attention at first. And then she began to ask him questions. And I'll give you some of the questions because they're real simple and the answers are interesting. She asked him, what do you mean when you were Green Arrow? And he said, when I was Green Arrow, I lived in the woods. And she said, was Green Arrow your name? He said, yes, that was my name. She asked him, did you live in a tent? He said, no, I lived in a house of trees. Well, she never understood exactly what he meant by that until they went into a toy store, and he pointed to a Lincoln log cabin at the toy store, and he said, that looks like my house. So he didn't have the word for log cabin, but he said it was a house made of trees. And then she decided she'd try to trick him and see if she could just trip him up in case he was just coming out with pure imagination. And she started asking questions like, what was your favorite TV show? And his answer was, I didn't have a TV. She said, what kind of car did you drive? His answer was, we didn't have cars, we rode horses. She asked what his favorite food was. Now, mind you, these answers are coming from a 3 or 4-year-old. He said, I ate bear meat, I ate fish, I dug food out of the ground. And she asked, what kind of clothes did you wear? He said, I cut animal skins off. Now, what's interesting is that over the years I have learned that children, primarily at the age of 3 and 4, and perhaps a little bit longer, but usually memories of past lives disappear about the time they go to school. And he has no memory of this now, but for that period of time, he could give rather vivid information over a period of time. I mean, he didn't just sit down and blurt all this out because that's not the way 3 and 4-year-olds act. But she learned that how he would catch fish and hung them up to dry. He talked about hunting with a bow and arrow. He talked about things like laying the skin out on the ground and scraping the blood off with a rock. And then he talked about sometimes there were big snows and he couldn't open the door of his cabin. Now, these kind of images, especially things like eating bear meat or scraping blood off a skin, those are beyond any contemporary child today that lives in America. So where was this coming from? And he's not the only, certainly not the only story. There's one, if your listeners would like to see a short video, you can just go to YouTube and type in, what's the best way to get to it? I think you can get it real simply and just type in The Future Pilot. And the whole title is Future Pilot /Adam/Little Cute Pilot. It's exactly 4 minutes and 59 minutes. You might as well say 5 minutes long. And this little boy was visiting the pilot at the front of a commercial airline, and he knew everything. I mean, he could point to switches and throttles and buttons, and he could tell the pilot what they were for. And it got much deeper than that. He would explain what you would have to do if there were certain kinds of emergencies. There's just no way that a child who, I think he was not quite 6, there's just no way a little 6-year-old or 5-year-old could possibly know these things. And the neat thing about seeing this in a YouTube is you can tell by the little boy's face that he's really sincere and, being straightforward with you. And it's a charming little 5-minute YouTube. And again, just type in Future Pilot in YouTube, and it'll probably come up as one of the top ones.
Oh, wow.
And it's a charming little YouTube.
Well, it's one thing I've noticed. I have actually had a guy on my show a couple of times. He wrote a book. One is called Penguins. It's about past reincarnation of, children. And he says that, by the time they're 7 years old, they forget. But back about 2 years ago, there was a case about this kid out of the UK. Again, he was like 4 or 5 years old. He said he was a fighter pilot, for the UK, Britain during World War II. He was flying a Spitfire fighter, and he got shot down, and he described a whole bunch of stuff. He described even his squadron people's names and all that stuff. And then when he got a little older, it kind of like drifted off. But again, how could somebody know all that stuff?
Well, the first book that I can remember reading about this subject, I literally read decades ago. And it was written by Dr. Ian Stevens, who was the head of psychiatry at the University of Virginia for 50 years. And he ended up, I think, writing something like 14, 15 books on reincarnation. He traveled around the world investigating past life stories from little children. And I'm digging stuff up from the really back corners of my memory. But the story that stuck in my head all these years was this little boy, and I can't tell you the country now. It was, India or the Middle East or someplace where they're more open to past life ideas. And this little boy insisted upon going to a village, and I believe he knew the name of it, and he was such a pest about it, they finally took him to this village. He identified his wife that he had in this other life. He revealed who had killed him and why he had been killed. And he had names. He knew, it seemed like he knew the names of street vendors and things like, that proved to be real. And that's always stuck in my head. I wish it stuck a little better so I could give you more specifics, but I no longer have the book, so you're, depending on my sketchy memories. But I found that quite incredible. And then these kind of stories kept coming up. At one point in my very varied career, I worked for Texas Instruments out in Texas, and I was at the home of one of my coworkers one day, and her little girl, who was in this same age bracket, probably about 3, she suddenly started talking about when her mommy